Well, hello everyone. Welcome to your optimization and spreadsheet modeling class, this class that formerly used to be called management science. So, I am your instructor, Dr. Mike Dominic. Please call me Mike. I am a Rutgers alumnus. I attended Rutgers in my undergraduate days, both at Camden and New Brunswick. Started many years ago. Finished in 4 years with my Bachelor of Science Electrical Engineering from New Brunswick. At that time, certainly still the case now. It's the only place you can get the engineering degree. You can't get it in Camden. So you want to reach me, you've got my email address, michael.dominic@rutgers.edu. You can text me or call me on my cell phone, 856-495-1273, and I'll respond to emails within 24 hours, text as fast as I can. And as an instructor, I consider myself flexible and understanding in terms of your deadlines and life challenges and circumstances and issues. Please feel free to reach out and let me know how I can help you if you need understanding. And with regard to resources you're going to need for this course, you are going to need a computer that can run one of the later versions of Microsoft Excel. You're going to have Solver enabled. I'll give you a link for making sure you know how to do that. And you're going to need that for both assignment problems and for the tests, for the exams. So lastly, with regard to any special requests, please feel free to reach out to me. And of course, I always welcome feedback, requests, comments, things you might need in that regard. So let's think about the things we want you to learn in this class. First and foremost, like so many of the classes at undergraduate level, we want you to understand critical thinking. We want you to be able to solve practical business problems. You're going to learn how to do these things in mathematical modeling ways. And let me tell you that I think that many of you in the course of your careers will use some of the techniques and methods, at least at an underlying level, that we're going to talk about in this class. So secondly, we want you to develop basic proficiency with some of these mathematical modeling techniques like linear programming, network models, project scheduling, and queuing/waiting lines. Again, you may wind up using third-party software products in the long run, but once you understand these basic modeling methods, it will go a long way toward helping you apply them in the real world. Thirdly, I want you to learn how that you can use these applications so that you can intelligently communicate and call upon specialists or consultants when those occasions arise in your life. You may not necessarily have to do this yourself. You may hire others to do it for you, but the more you know about it, the better you're going to be able to understand and apply and not be taken advantage of. And so lastly, I'm hoping that you're going to become more confident and comfortable working with Excel, because I think that's going to help you in a significant way in the long run from the job market and in your career. Now let's talk about some of the things, the highlights you're going to find in these slide materials. And again, these slides are going to be available without the video recording overlaid on top of it. They'll just say presentation only. When I highlight something in red, in some cases in yellow, those are going to be the really important things for tests. Now, all my tests are open book and open computer. So you're going to be able to pull these files in, and you'll have ample time to take the online tests. And it's open everything except no open friends. Okay, I'm going to rely upon you to maintain compliance with the academic integrity policy of the university. Now, within the realm of management science, there are lots of different techniques that conceivably you could learn if you were an operations research major in a university or a practitioner. But we're only going to examine a few of these. And as I've indicated here in asterisks, the linear programming, part CPM, which is scheduling, the waiting line, which I talked about earlier. We're going to talk to you about how to do some decision analysis. And one of those is AHP, Analytic Hierarchy Process. I'll tell you examples and stories about how they're used in the real world. And the networking models are something you could apply to project scheduling. And similarly, goal programming is most closely associated with linear programming. So let's talk a little bit about some of these. So linear programming is with regard to establishing optimization methods and maximizing or minimizing some situation, maximizing profit, minimizing costs, and so on. Networking models, we're going to use those to define things about again, I mentioned project scheduling, when we do different types of designs and architectures for how logistics systems like transportation systems might be designed and used. And something that you may take for granted that, say, somebody like a UPS driver and the route methods that you're maybe familiar with, and certainly you use in Google Maps and the like in your own right. And there are networking models and algorithms that underlie some of those techniques. We're going to explore some of those. Project scheduling and PERT and CPM, boy, you live with this every day in your life, whether you recognize it or not, whether you've ever had a project management course in your life or whether you have any exposure to project management techniques. I teach this for Rutgers and other executive education situations, and it's really, really important. I think perhaps far and wide, most of you at some point in your lives and your careers will wind up understanding PERT and CPM and having to apply it. This may be one of the more useful aspects of this course in the long run for all of you. Waiting line or queuing models, something that we all live with, certainly in terms of the way, say, red lights are programmed, and the way we establish the way we can use the internet to connect, and so on. There are queuing models inherent in a lot of the algorithms that routers and the like use to connect points on the internet. So whether you recognize it or not, those queuing models apply to your everyday life. So many things that you use since you use the internet so extensively. And lastly, decision analyses in terms of making decisions about purchasing, about competitions. I use this with my clients in real-world applications, especially AHP, and it's really, really useful. Now, to the big picture and to this notion of body of knowledge, sometimes these are referred to in these different terms. I've used it already here: management science, OR, operations research, decision sciences. So a lot of these methodologies, whether we call them optimization and modeling techniques or the like as this course is titled, a lot of these have their early roots around the time of World War II with the introduction of higher capacity and larger scale computing, especially, aided a great deal. And it was something that was used for a variety of developments during that era and that time. And in terms of, again, with the association of explosion in computing power and the things we have at our fingertips, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, again, whether you recognize it or not, whether it's on your phones or on the servers that are interfacing and communicating to your phones that utilize these types of techniques. And I'll point them out as we go along. All right, so one of the first things that we're going to talk about, and this is just a definitional thing, but again, there'll be something on the first test that you're going to want to refer to, right? That's because I've got these highlighted in yellow. This is a broad structure of the nature of problem solving, and the first 5 steps are part of decision making. And the first of these steps, we want to identify and define the problem. Sometimes that might seem obvious to you, but the reality is one of the first challenges is to define that problem. There's a saying I like to use: a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And again, we can't solve a problem unless we can define and agree upon that very well. And sometimes that takes a lot of work. And secondly, we want to understand the potential for alternative solutions, and we can use some of these techniques to help us develop that. And thirdly, we want to identify the criteria for evaluating those alternatives. And let's just say you want to make a choice in terms of where you want to go for lunch. Number 2 would say, well, I can go to Wendy's, I can go to McDonald's, I can go to a deli, I can go to a fancy restaurant. The third question would be, well, what's the criteria I'm going to use to evaluate those? Is it going to be based on cost? Is it going to be based on comfort? It's going to be based on convenience? It's going to be based on time? Whatever your criteria, you make decisions every day based on a variety of criteria. And when we do some quantitative decision modeling, we need to identify those criteria. And once we understand those criteria, then we evaluate the alternatives. So if you say lunch, I'm going to go on the basis of what it's going to cost me. And you might say, I'll give the highest priority to the lowest cost. Or maybe you're indifferent to cost and you're more concerned with comfort and convenience. Again, only till you document and understand what it is that's important to you for your criteria for evaluating can you really conduct a quantitative decision model. And step 5 would be you choose an alternative. And you make a decision based on the criteria you've set. At this juncture, this is really the end of decision making, which is more limited than problem solving, because problem solving requires what I call here steps 6 and 7, where we implement the selected alternative and then we evaluate the results. And so in case of, say, where you're going to go for lunch, you might say McDonald's, and you might come away and say, yeah, I used the price point as my most important criteria, but boy, I didn't really feel good about it. Maybe I need to introduce a new criteria called nutrition and health and calories or the like, and then you reincorporate that into your decision processes when you evaluate the results. Simple example, hopefully you're getting the idea. So in terms of that type of example that I just gave you, and where we follow this process from left to right, that I just recited to you a moment ago, sometimes I said with regard to the criteria that you may make it based on price. What's lunch going to cost me? And if we have that, we have one criteria, then we call that a single criteria decision problem. In some cases, we have more than one criteria. We might say, well, let's incorporate price, but let's also incorporate the nutritional value. Let's also consider convenience, or let's consider how much time it's going to consume for us to take lunch at that location. So when we have those kinds of situations, and we'll talk about them as the course goes on, we refer to those as multi-criteria decision problems. In another case, not in a non-quantitative way, sometimes we do things based in a qualitative way. Our intuition, our feelings, our gut instinct. And granted, those are all the ways lots of decisions are made in life. You have to decide when you're going to make something based on a qualitative decision or a quantitative decision, and make it clear, especially when you're working in organizational or group settings, what's the methodology that you're going to apply. Qualitative methods are more of an art than a science. Quantitative methods we use here are certainly more of a science. So if we've decided that we're going to use a quantitative method, then we begin with an analysis phase. We try to understand, again, those quantitative facts, those criteria, the numbers, the other things that we can develop a quantitative expression for. And we in turn develop that expression in mathematical matters. We define an objective. We want to minimize cost, and we want to maximize revenue. That's an objective function. We identify constraints. We may say, well, we've only got a certain amount of money to spend, or we can only produce a certain number of widgets in a given period of time, or we have to work at least 8 hours a day. And once we define those mathematical expressions, right, we can use those to develop the recommendation. Now, there are a lot of good reasons to do a quantitative analysis of these things. If we have something that's very complex, there are a lot of variables involved, something that we can express in a way that we in our human mind can only handle a couple of variables at a time, then maybe doing a quantitative approach and expressing it mathematically would be useful. If it's very important, certainly we may want to do that kind of trade-off as well. If it's something that's new, not been seen before, we don't have necessarily any experience or resources to call upon. And then lastly, if it's repetitive, it's going to be a decision that's going to be made again and again, or at least a structure of a decision, it's useful to express it mathematically so that you can use the same criteria and maybe tailor the models if need be, but at least you've got a basis that's founded in mathematics. Now, these types of quantitative decisions aren't going to apply to every type of decision-making method. You can't decide perhaps whether you want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend based on a people selection that might be quantitative. Maybe not so good. You're going to use some gut instinct perhaps as well. In terms of urgent or emergency conditions, you may have some criteria that you use, but it may not be mathematically expressed. So again, they may not apply to every type of situation in life. But I'll tell you, there are a lot more of them than you may realize. I'm going to pause here and we're going to go to the next recording segment. This is the end of recording segment number 1 for chapter week 1.